Prisons. A facility in which convicted criminals are confined involuntarily and against their will and denied a variety of freedoms under the authority of the state as punishment for various crimes. The earliest records of prisons date back to 1000 BC, in the early historical civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. With a history spanning that far back, it should come as no surprise that some of these facilities are haunted. Join us, as we look at some of the most haunted prisons in the U.S. For our first haunted prison, Alcatraz. Probably the most famous prison on our list, Alcatraz, located in San Francisco, California, was known as the Rock and the Ultimate Prison. Many of the country's worst criminals were sent here, including Doc Barker, Al Capone, murderer Robert Stroud, and George Machine Gun Kelly. It was initially a military prison but ended up housing the most notorious criminals. It was built in 1859 but stopped being used in the 1920s before reopening in 1933. The grand reopening billed the federal prison as escape-proof. Many criminals housed here were driven to insanity, murder, and suicide. There were various escape attempts, but only one was successful. In 1962, 3 bank robbers escaped into the bay on handmade rubber rafts. Just a year later, the jail closed. It is considered one of America's most haunted places, and ghosts have been reported by visitors and staff members of the National Park Service, who currently operate the property. There have been sightings of apparitions and sounds of screams, weeping, and Al Capone's banjo music. For our next haunted facility, Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary. Nestled in the small community of Petros, Tennessee, Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, also called the End of the Line, has a long history of operation from 1896 to 2009. The most famous inmate is James Earl Ray, who murdered Martin Luther King Jr. He escaped from here once, for 58 hours, with 6 other inmates. He was captured just 8.5 miles away, and he died within the prison in 1998, and it is rumored that he never left. People have reported screams and a clanging noise that could be Ray longing to escape again or hitting the bars. These noises could be caused by those who hung themselves, those that were severely beaten, or the prisoner who was chopped up and flushed down the toilet. There was an average of 1 murder per week within these prison walls. Up next, Ohio State Penitentiary. The Ohio Penitentiary saw its fair share of death since it opened in 1834. Although it was condemned by those who reformed, it remained open until 1979. The building itself has been taken down, but there are still reports of apparitions haunting the space. Many people died from cholera outbreaks, fire, execution by electric chair, and murder when it was in operation. There was a massive fire in 1930 that killed a staggering 322 inmates that night. After that night, the inmates complained of ghosts and supernatural occurrences. Once it was torn down, there were sightings of apparitions haunting its ruins. The former penitentiary site now sits within the Arena District, with Burnham Square condominiums, McPherson Commons, and several office buildings and parking garages now standing on the site. Next up, Eastern State Penitentiary. This prison, or penitentiary, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, was founded by the Quakers in 1829. It is a stone castle, and the thought behind it being called a penitentiary is that it is a place where criminals could become penitent for the crimes they committed. Prisoners were kept in total isolation in windowless rooms. Many of them went insane, and the punishments for breaking the rules were severe. Suicides in Eastern State Penitentiary were common, especially if you had to sit in a mad chair, where the inmate was strapped in so tightly that it cut off circulation, and sometimes, limbs had to be amputated. The solitary confinement ended in the 1870s, and the penitentiary was closed about 100 years later. People have heard footsteps and mysterious sounds, such as the jingling of keys and laughter, and have also seen apparitions. Cell blocks 4, 6, and 12 are the most active, and the prison is now a historic landmark and open to the public as a museum. Up next, Old Idaho State Penitentiary. Old Idaho State Penitentiary first opened in the 1870s and was closed in 1973. It began as a one-cell house before growing into a large complex of buildings surrounded by a sandstone wall. Housing over 13,000 inmates while opened, they were forced to mine the rock quarries nearby to build the walls of their prison. The conditions were brutal, with the surrounding sandstone keeping in the summer heat and creating bitter cold conditions in the winter. There were riots, fires, and deaths before it was abandoned, and 110 people died within its walls from illness, old age, executions, and murder. The gallows were originally set up in the Rose Garden, and some spirits seem to have remained here. There is a male spirit dressed in gardening clothes, seen walking amongst the garden. People have reported feelings of dread, anxiety, sadness, being touched, hearing whispers, and seeing flickering lights. Five House, where murderer Raymond Allen Snowden was executed, is the most active spot, and people speculate that his ghost remains. For our next haunted prison, Missouri State Penitentiary. This penitentiary, also known as the Walls or the bloodiest 47 acres in America, was built in the early 1830s. Its original prisoners made the bricks that make up the first walls of the building. The prison grew many times from its initial 15 inmates until it was ultimately closed in 2004. During this time, many well-known prisoners, including James Earl Ray, were in for burglary. Charles Pretty Boy Floyd was also incarcerated here, and there was a riot at the prison in 1954, which killed 4 prisoners and injured 29 others. In addition to this incident, 40 prisoners were executed in the prison's gas chamber while it was operating. Since its closing, it has been a prime location for hauntings. There have been many reported encounters with a variety of spirits. People have felt strange heavy feelings and caught an unearthly human figure on camera in cell number 48, which at one point housed a snitch who was bludgeoned to death during the riot. Another ghost that hangs out near the control room is known as Fast Jack. He usually carries a clipboard and wears a white lab coat. It is believed he was a trustee who worked in the medical facilities, and others have reported him appearing and vanishing or moving through walls. Please like and subscribe for part 2 and for more videos.